So let's start with the beginning.
You may be the leader, but there's going to be other people there that have really good strengths and talents, and your ability to bring those out of other people. Well, what an opportunity to come up with some cool stuff.
Do you believe that in that example that you just shared, that you had that answer in you already?
It's very hard to always be the thing that you aspire to be for your core values. Here's what we say, but then here's what we do, and kind of the misalignment between that.
Yeah.
That hinders a leader's ability to lead, and in many cases, like to want to lead.
On that note of kindness, tell me about an act of kindness that someone did for you that touched your life.
Oh, great question.
I think it's terribly important to insist on individual values.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Initiative, creation, all these things which we value. It's now possible to make organizations on a larger scale than was ever possible before.
Learning Culture Podcast.
Teach people to analyze the kind of things that are said to them.
Al, welcome to the show.
Andrew, it's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh man, to do this in person as well is pretty special. And I know you've been doing that around the ATD event this week. How was the event for you so far?
It's been great. I was telling someone else, I've been really fortunate in that I've been going to conferences since I was 12 or 13. My dad actually ran a consulting business where one of his jobs was to produce conferences as well as he produced his own conference. And so conferences have always been in my blood and my lineage. And so coming to these places, it feels like coming home a little bit just because I've been to so many. But I think for me, at least, it's always great to learn and connect with peers. And that's kind of what I've been here doing this week. And even this for that matter, too. I mean, people didn't hear what we were talking about before, but we were talking shop and trying to learn from each other.
Exactly.
So it kind of is just infectious in all the stuff you do when you're at a conference.
Yeah, there's so much you pick up just in those little conversations and stuff. Yeah. All right. So for today's episode, like a special one on my podcast with you, I want to use this time. We've done one before together, but for this one, I want to get a little bit around like who is LD, unpack that a bit for listeners who know you from LinkedIn and other places and your podcast. So let's start with the beginning. Who or what did you want to be when you were growing up?
It's so funny. I always used to say that growing up, there was this story. I think my parents used to tell me where I was at a neighbor's house. They had us like sleeping over and like camping out in the backyard. And I guess I told the parent that when I grew up, I wanted to either be an engineer, a firefighter, a basketball player in the NBA, or to get an actual MBA.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated business school, I said, well, I was 1 for 4.
Yeah.
So I guess when I was growing up, I think like a lot of kids when they're growing up, they look out and see what are those things that are out there that I could possibly be that of at the time.
Yeah.
But I always knew, I think, that I would work somewhere in quote unquote business. My dad and my mom both had worked in the corporate world, and then my dad went off and founded his own company. And so I knew I would work in business. At some point, I did think I learned the idea of entrepreneurship. Another fun fact about me, I was told this when I was younger. Apparently, when I was in first grade, I would get packed a lunch, and I used to try to sell off some of the items that I had. So
hilarious.
Even though I ended up going the corporate route, like eventually, I always kind of had that entrepreneurship kind of gene in my blood. And so I think that certainly business, a little bit of entrepreneurship, but certainly still some of those many traditional kind of things that you sometimes hear with kids wanting to be in terms of wanting to be a pro athlete and wanting to be an engineer or wanting to be an astronaut and those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. And you chose education in getting that MBA.
Sure.
We also both have consulting backgrounds, corporate backgrounds. Like you were at Deloitte.
I was,
right?
yes.
Yeah. And KPMG. And so, curious like why that path resonated for you as the one that you ended up choosing.
So I remember this actually, again, you're jogging me back to all of my memories from growing up. I remember when I was in college and it was my sophomore year. And at the time I was in student government, and typically at the time, people who ran for student body president and vice president were always seniors because juniors because the next year they were going to be seniors. And I remember as a sophomore, someone had asked me, hey, would you like to run as my vice president? And typically sophomores didn't run on the ticket because they were too junior. And I was debating them or not whether I wanted to do it or not, and I didn't know what to do. So I remember calling my dad, and I remember just asking him, hey, what should I do? And instead of telling me the answer, he just kept asking me these questions and all these questions. And as he's asking me these questions, I'm just like, just tell me the answer. I just want to know like how to solve this problem, like how to figure this out.
Yeah.
And by like maybe like the 12th question, like I literally said it out loud, like, I don't need to run. And he was like, okay, well, there's your answer.
Yeah.
And so that was like, looking back, like one of those moments where I was like, oh, now I know what he was doing to me. You know, he was trying to help me think through how to solve a problem, using deductive reasoning, using logic, trying to help me understand what's all the information out there and how do you make a good decision. So in that decision, I chose not to run. And then the next year I did run, and I was eventually elected student body president.
Yeah.
But I think that was one of those moments where, looking back, it kind of switched a light in me of, oh, I really like that idea of being a thought partner to someone else to help solve a really tough challenge, and kind of unearthing the insights and distilling problems and just trying to explain things in ways that people can understand so that they can take the action they need to take or to be effective. And fundamentally, that's all really what consulting is, regardless of how you do it, whether you do it at a place like we did it or just if you're just a mom and pop shop doing it on your own.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And do you believe that fundamentally, in that example that you just shared, that you had that answer in you already?
It's a great question. I mean, yes, in the sense of there were only two options on paper, like yes or no.
Right.
I think what was really helpful about what he did and in that moment were two things. Number one, he knew me. I mean, arguably he knew me better than almost anyone else.
Yeah.
But the second thing is that he didn't treat me as him knowing more about me. He treated me as an equal, and it felt like, I think what it gave me was, it gave me a sense of agency around, it is my decision. And whether or not I truly believed that I had the answer, I felt confident enough because of the types of questions that he was asking that I could go and find it. And so I think that was something that really stuck with me, and is something I've tried to model in what I do in a lot of my interactions.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned agency as a key part of that, and how it relates to leadership, right? And how a lot of companies are recognizing now that maybe there's a lack of that agency, right? There's that sense of people feeling like all the change that's happening is something that's being done to them, and right, and kind of helping people through that. I want to go to the question now of kind of leadership quality, because that's something that you and I think a lot about.
Sure.
The agency is one big one that feels relevant to that conversation. So I'd love to hear your perspective on that, and then what other ones do you think are important right now?
I would say, above all, I think leadership really is at the fundamental levels of, how do you get a group of people to collectively achieve a common goal, like at the fundamental level.
Yeah.
And what to me that speaks to is, I think you have to operate from a mindset of we first and then me.
Yeah.
Because if you are truly leading other people, there are more of the others than there are of you.
Yeah.
And so while you matter as a leader, what also really matters is how you're going to be able to scale the others in order to achieve that outcome. And so I think that would be one of the first things. I mean, you could call it a collective mindset, an outside-in mindset, or just being able to kind of put the collective above the individual, while still acknowledging that you as an individual leader like have a role to play, but only in the context of knowing that you cannot do it alone and you need the support of others. I think the other element of this, which I think ties to the agency piece, is that we do kind of operate in a complex world, which means that there are times when we are not going to have all of the answers, or there are times when the simple rote kind of repeatable kind of things you can do are not always going to help us achieve the outcomes that we want. Like sometimes it is fluid. Sometimes there isn't a known playbook for how to do something. And so in those moments where you don't fully have control over what the outcome is, I do think you have to acknowledge that complexity that exists and to be comfortable with exploring it and to be open to that. I think whether it's because of just how traditionally we've done things in terms of having more of a, at least in the United States, a more command and control structure where someone said something and everyone did it, that certainly still applies in some situations, but there's a lot of other situations today, even just by the nature of so much can happen at the front lines of an organization in terms of problems that come up or solutions come up. Not all leaders have the ability to just tell people what to do or to even see that. And so the command and control in that situation won't work. And so I think that being open to this idea that that you may not have all of the answers, but that you're open to exploring what they could be, and then using that outside-in mindset to work together towards some kind of outcome, I think is really important.
I totally agree. I think you're onto something very important here. I've often thought about this in the context. So this idea of being comfortable with uncertainty, almost flipping that to an absolute of rejecting certainty, right? Like getting like completely comfortable and not more than comfortable, rejecting certainty. So I don't fully know, like kind of, having that mindset of this is not a doubt thing either, right? But this is like, there is more, right? Like kind of a constant like posture towards curiosity and openness to find out more of what you may be missing, right? And then how that connects back to what you were saying about leading, almost like leading through others, right? It's not like leadership isn't a thing you do to people. It's this like, so everything, all of this is this, there's like a fluidness to it, right? Of like, you're never really on solid ground. You're always exploring, you're always feeling into new territory. That's difficult. It's uncomfortable for people, right? But that's just the game.
It is. And I think part of it, the invitation around it is that when you are more comfortable with that, you can be open to more expansive opportunities. There is an opportunity to come up with ideas or solutions that you may not have even thought of. When you are open to the fact that there is ambiguity and uncertainty, right? And also, there is a lot that you can gain when, to your point, you are open to the idea that you may not have all the answers and that you can choose curiosity over comfort to learn what they are or to tap into other people who might have those answers. But that's only when you recognize again that the we is more important at first than the me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and I think this is a fundamental truth about reality, is that we all see it differently, right? And so like it's just through like we have selective attention. It's driven by our goals, our prior experiences. Like, so you see different things to me and see it in slightly different ways. That thing that we're seeing is reality, and we're all seeing a part of it only, right? And so like just recognizing that and going like, oh, actually there's value in someone else's perspective because they're seeing something that I'm just not even programmed to see, right?
Totally. Well, and I think it's funny, team sports, I love kind of doing references to team sports.
Same. Yeah.
And because I think there's a lot of parallels. There's definitely some nuances and differences, but I think there are a lot of parallels. And I think if you look at some of the greatest teams, pick your favorite sport, or for that matter, pick if you're into theater or music. I mean, look at Taylor Swift. Yeah. She's an incredible superstar. I don't know her personally, but I would bet that she would be the first to admit she would not be able to do what she does without the incredible team that she has. And you can see it in her production. Yeah. But similarly, on American football or international football for that matter, there are always going to be Messis of the world. Yeah. There's always going to be a little LeBron James. There's always going to be an Anthony Edwards if you follow the NBA. Yeah. But even those players need others around them. Yeah. And you're seeing it now with some of the top players in the world. Like some of the top players on the best teams, they bring out the best in others. And they see that other people around them have strengths. They may not be in the same way, right? Messi might, or the goalie who was on Messi's team may not have the same strengths as Messi, but he's super freaking important, right? 100%. And so the same is true though for any organization or any team that you're on. Yeah. You may be the leader, but there's going to be other people there that have really good strengths and talents, and your ability to bring those out of other people. Well, what an opportunity to come up with some cool stuff. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. And so let's talk about that organizational aspect a bit, and then I'm going to get back to LD again because but this makes sense that we get into this topic. What can organizations do to? I'm going to ask you in two ways, and let's just see like where your mind goes with that.
Sure.
What can leaders do to encourage? What can organizations do to encourage leaders?
Yeah. So I think one of the challenges that many organizations have now is that many organizations and their accompanying systems and processes are set up to reward individual performance and to value individual performance because that is something that we technically know how to do. There are definitely some people who would disagree with that, but like directionally speaking, there are mechanisms in place in terms of measuring and codifying individual performance.
And to reiterate that, like I think also for promoting and pay increases, it has to be. Yeah.
But if you all agree with what we just talked about in terms of the power of the collective, in terms of that great ideas can come from anywhere, in terms of that in today's world of work, a lot of times an outcome is achieved not just by one person, but by a team.
Yeah.
One of the things that we don't really have yet at many organizations is good mechanisms to encourage, reward, promote those team-based behaviors.
Yeah.
And, there's the famous quote, I'm sure you've heard it before, organizations are perfectly designed to get the results that they get.
Yeah.
And so if you want to see more of that, well, then start designing for it. So that's like a base layer. I recognize very much not every single leader is going to be able to control the performance management system in their organization. And so I do think, though, that there are things leaders can do to encourage more team-based kind of behaviors, if you will, in terms of what do they choose to model? What do they choose to reward? What do they choose to communicate and call out and say, hey, this is the kind of work that we really want to be done around here, and here's the way that we want to do it. And when someone's doing it, calling it out and saying, hey, that thing you did, that was really great. That's the kind of work we want to see here, and really encouraging other people to do it in that way.
Yeah.
So I think those would be the things that I would start with as a starting point.
Yeah, I love that. They're very systems focused and also incentives.
100%.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so now let's invert this. What can organizations do to stifle leaders?
Well, for some, they're already doing a good job.
So what have you seen? Without mentioning names.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think the classic one is kind of the here's what we say, but then here's what we do, and kind of the misalignment between that.
Yeah.
We say that we are a company that prioritizes X, but then when it comes time to the behaviors that are rewarded, those behaviors either are not rewarded or a antithesis behavior that is rewarded. So I think that's the first, a very common first thing. And look, it's very hard to always be the thing that you aspire to be for your core values. Everyone's always in a constant pursuit of trying to live up to that.
Yeah.
But I think that is definitely something that can hinder a lot of leaders because if you say that you're an organization that values pick whatever it is, and then someone exhibits a value in that way and they either get punished or they don't get rewarded, what does that do to that individual? It
sends a message, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think another thing is just not giving leaders the infrastructure and tools to be able to do their jobs effectively. And in some cases, quite frankly, one of the biggest things could honestly just be time, right? Just like anything else, leading there are times when you need to think or to do, and when you're overloaded with responsibilities, when your span of control is too large, when you have workloads that are unreasonable or projects that are not mapped to priorities, but someone wants you to do it because it's their pet project, that hinders a leader's ability to lead, and in many cases, to want to lead. And in some cases where they may do it, it may not be at the level of engagement that you would probably want out of them, or potentially could lead to some other adverse outcomes down the road. So I would say those are a couple common ones.
Yeah, this is great, and this is given the time that we have. Right?
Sure,
we've got this limited time because I want to go deep into all of those with you, and we're going to have follow-up conversations with that because but that's great. I think that is it's a kind of a great padding of your viewpoint, right? Your point of view on a lot of things at leadership. Yeah. And the things that you've seen and all the research you're doing, all the clients you work with, that kind of stuff. Okay. So at the risk of not going deep enough, and there's probably people listening going why isn't he asking more? I want to go back to a rapid fire question.
Yeah, go for it.
So let's go to, so rapid fire. What song best represents you?
What song best represents me?
Did I share these with you before?
No.
Oh, shit.
It's okay. It's okay.
This is real, raw, live on the spot.
Okay, so I'm going to workshop this out loud. I don't know if this best represents me, but this is kind of how I feel right now. One of my favorite before favorite Kanye West songs back in his heyday was a song "Welcome to the Good Life."
Yeah.
I feel very lucky to be where I am in my life, where I am, and so I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
And so that would be the song that represents me right now.
Amazing answer, and I'm glad I didn't share it with you before, because that's like, that was real. That was
Yeah.
raw. What book is next to your bed or on your desk right now?
So one of my favorite books of all time is a book by the author Tim Sanders. It's called Love is the Killer App. It's a New York Times bestseller. It came out in the early 2000s, and he did a reprint of it in maybe like 2022 or 2023. I had the chance to interview Tim eventually on one of my podcasts, and it was a really meaningful moment. But that book taught me that, and it affirmed to me that you can win in life by being kind, generous, and thoughtful, and gave me the inspiration to kind of live in that way. I read it when I was maybe in high school, and it's really been a model for me for what I try to ascribe to be.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I'm going to check that out. Love is the Killer App?
Yes.
Yeah. On that note of kindness, tell me about an act of kindness that someone did for you that touched your life.
Oh, great question. Well, I mean, yesterday I had a session, yesterday I had a session, and after the session, a woman came up after me and introduced herself and said her name, and she just said, I've been following you on LinkedIn. I finally had a chance to see you, and I just want to tell you that this was the best session that I've come to at this conference, and you gave me a number of things that I know that I can try right away. So that was like really meaningful to me. And then on the way out, I stopped by and talked to the woman who kind of managed the career center where I did my talk. And she had said to me, oh, by the way, like, we heard your session was amazing. A woman came up to me to let me know that you did such an amazing job and that we should have you back next year. And so, it was one of those things where, it was very kind of her to come up and give me that feedback.
Yeah.
She didn't have to go up to the other woman to say that, but that was really like, it's a small thing, but it makes a big deal that someone cared enough to go and do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's awesome. Okay, last one is one person that you think we should all know about. It's going to be a politician, writer, musician, artist, journalist, even friend of yours. Someone that we should all know.
Yes. So someone we should all know. I think some people may know her, but I'll plug her name anywhere. Her name is Dr. Tasha Eurich.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
Self-awareness.
So yeah, she is self-awareness. So Tasha is a friend and mentor of mine, but I think her work is really, really important. And for those who aren't aware, she is the author of 2 books, Insight and Bankable Leadership, but she has done a lot of research on self-awareness. And so I think that the work she is doing is super, super important for all of us as leaders, all of us as people. But in addition to that, she's just one of like the kindest and strongest people that I know. So I would say Tasha Eurich.
Amazing, and that's awesome. I'm gonna ask you more about that after this.
Yeah,
that's great. Cool. Okay, so final question then. What's next for Al? And what value? Like, what are you most looking forward to going forward? And what value do you want to embody going into that?
So I've run my leadership development consultancy, The Edge of Work, now for about 3 years, and I love doing this work. I love being able to work with organizations to develop their talent and build their next generation of leaders. And I hope to be able to continue to do that. And I think for me, what I want to value and embody the most as someone who runs their own business, I think one of the cool things about this work and running your own business is that by the very nature of how you have to survive in terms of having clients, part of who you work with is your choice. And oftentimes, particularly in a service-based business, part of what someone choosing to work with you means is that they share the same ideas of how you see the world or how you want the world to be. And so I hope to be able to continue sharing my thoughts and ideas that I think will be helpful to developing people and developing teams and developing organizations, because I would like to find other potential clients, friends, colleagues who also share those same ideas, because I do believe that those will be things that will make the workplace better and make organizations better. And so I think the more that I can lean into sharpening those ideas and sharing them out there, the more I can find other people who might feel the same way and help me sharpen my ideas, and also obviously to keep me in business and to keep furthering that growth. And so I think for me, it's just really being committed to the craft and being able to be sharing those ideas and getting feedback and making them better, so that I can help, do my part to just create a better workplace.
Well, I think you're going to be the beneficiary of the power of compounding, because you have such a great focus on just values and consistent behavior and
thank you,
all of that. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and thanks so much for coming on the show,
Andrew. It's a pleasure.
Hello. I hope you enjoyed that episode. It's Andrew again with a quick message. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is to leave us ratings and reviews where you listened. If you're on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe buttons and feel free to leave a comment. We love hearing from our listeners and viewers. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, please take the time to give us a rating and leave a review. Once again, we love hearing from our loyal listeners. If you're listening to this on Spotify, please hit the follow button to make sure that you don't miss new episodes as they come out. See you next week for another episode of the Learning Culture Podcast. Thank you for listening.